Unicorn Overlord released just over 2 weeks ago, with reviewers and many fans of strategy RPGs gushing over the engaging gameplay. The wide array of characters and classes on display, alongside a diversity available in constructing unit combinations, lends itself to a compelling and somewhat addictive gameplay loop. Recruiting a new character or class and immediately strategizing where this newest ally will slot into your army is probably where the game's at its strongest. The characters themselves are likable and, for the most part, receive plenty of characterization. Strong vocal performances help to elevate these characterizations and allow their personalities to shine true.
Always counted your pride as a member of the royal line to be among your greatest strengths. Yet were Prince Gilbert to see you now, he would surely view it as nothing but a weakness.
I dare you to say that again.
Battle animations and the art style of the cutscenes help to bring Cornea and its surrounding kingdoms to life. From the lush forests of Elheim to the austere snowscapes of Pistorius, the game delivers a classic high fantasy experience. These facets of the game have been widely acknowledged and praised upon release, and even pre-release from the expansive demo offered. The game's review scores reflect a positive reception by reviewers, a sentiment that is mirrored by the game's growing and loyal fanbase. However, looking through several prominent game reviews, a common theme arises. To give a broad synopsis, the gameplay, visuals, and characters are great, and the story is generally regarded as decent or in some cases lackluster. Personally, I find myself agreeing with this general consensus. I love the gameplay and presentation and found the story to have ever so slightly missed its mark. There's been a lot of discourse on the gameplay side of things, particularly about optimal unit building and the perceived challenge of the game's hardest difficulty settings. As of writing this script, a lot of unit tier lists and unique gameplay challenges are beginning to surface, as players get to grips with understanding the game mechanics. To break away from this mold, I'm setting aside my personal opinions on gameplay, of which I do have a few, and focusing primarily on the story for this video. At this point in the video, I'm going to give a spoiler warning, as I will be discussing the game's main plot. So if you'd like to experience the game's story for yourself, maybe click back on this video when you've had a chance to play it through. The way the story unfolds throughout the game is nothing we haven't seen before from other games in the genre. A prince ventures forth to liberate nations oppressed by an evil kingdom and bolster his army along the way. A classic tale of fighting back evil and restoring peace to the world. I want to stress at this point in the video that there are many things I like about the story of Unicorn Overlord. It has a lot of heart. The character arcs are compelling, backed by decent writing and great performances. At least for the most part.
Hope you got room for another pair of boots then. As long as you keep living, you can always turn things around. Start fresh.
The story can have moments of levity,
She's huge.
Oh!
accompanied by more serious topics.
You know what happens next. The day will come when we look back at this, all of this, and feel we made the right decision. It has to, doesn't it?
There is a lot to like about the story, and I'm sure that most players resonated with at least some parts of the campaign. It isn't perfect by any means. There's probably a few too many instances of brainwashed heroes who turn back to the good side for my liking. Overall, though, a mostly positive experience. My issue with the story isn't a criticism of this formulaic approach to storytelling. It's a classic trope of high fantasy fiction for a reason, after all, in that it mostly works, but rather with the disjointed approach to delivering that story to the player. I think the content and overall themes of the overarching story are perfectly valid plotlines. When journeying from kingdom to kingdom and liberating the various surrounding nations, however, there is little driving force for the overall plot when initially visiting these areas. It's as if the game itself forgets the general plotline it established in its opening hours. Sure, it's always good to free and oppress people and resolve the conflict in the region, no arguments here, yet I can't help but feel that the main plot of the story, the invading dark army of Zenoira and the motivations behind their leaders, takes a backseat to the individual kingdom stories. The impetus for visiting these nations becomes more about battle and recruitment, and less about understanding and developing our villains. While we do get some brief scattered glimpses of our villains dispersed in these kingdoms, particularly Baltro, the lion's share of this development is relegated to the very last stretch of the game. This is a shame, as the content shown, even in the demo, appears to set up a narrative with the potential to unfold gradually as the game progresses. As a recap of this early game story, The Liberation Army's first main battle in freeing Cornea is against Galerius as we rescue Scarlet, a priestess, and our protagonist Elaine's close friend. Upon defeating Galerius, the sorcerer Baltro appears and uses Scarlet to break the last seal on the sages, linking Fevrid to the world beyond. Our villains have achieved their goal and have been granted access to the souls of the former kingdom of Zenoira, which Galerius wishes to set free. With their departure, the Sage of the Temple explains how Elaine must unbind the power of the ring by visiting the elves.
Now heed my words. You must take the ring to the land of elves and awaken the ancient power slumbering within.
Scarlet survives the ordeal and explains her significance to Elaine.
Galerius spoke true. Pontifex Arant is my father.
Her lineage was necessary to break the seal on the last stage. At this point, we seem to have the outline for the story. Unlock the power of Elaine's ring and use it to combat Galerius. Does the game deliver on this premise? To be blunt, not at all. At least not for the majority of the player's experience with the game. From this point onwards, the story takes a long and circuitous road towards achieving this goal. Aside from unlocking the power of the ring at the conclusion of the Elheim story arc, about midway through the game,
I'd like you to have the ring of the maiden.
Are you certain the role is mine to have?
I am. History will surely sing of your undying loyalty, and I can only hope they depict it at my side.
which actually doesn't make a material difference to the story right away. The game doesn't really advance this plotline until visiting the final nation in Fevrith. While there is some degree of freedom in the order you can choose to visit each nation, the battle level of each kingdom realistically dictates the order you visit each kingdom. With this system in place, the game pushes the order of Cornea, Drakenhold, Elheim, Bistorius, and Albion. By the time we pick back up this plotline of the Sage and unlocking the ring's true power, we are firmly in Albion. So some 40 to 50 hours later, we continue this plot. In Albion, Scarlet is front and center at this point in the story, after having narratively faded to the background after her rescue. By this stage in the game, I had mostly forgotten about the appearance of the Sage and Scarlet's secret identity as the daughter of the late Pontifex. So much so that when they address Scarlet's heritage in the story at this point, I forgot it was supposed to be a secret. Lex just sort of blurts it out in Albion, and the rest of the cast was surprised.
Hey, not to butt in, but isn't Scarlet supposed to be the new Pontifex?
Why would you think such a thing?
Well, the two of you have been acting real weird ever since we got to Albion. I was gonna come ask why when I overheard you talking about it. Sorry, I wasn't trying to pry.
Does he speak true?
He does. I'm sorry for hiding it from you all.
I genuinely couldn't remember much of the early game by this stage. So much had happened in the interim, it was like a distant memory. Were we supposed to be surprised? Upon completing Albion's plot, we receive a new main quest to visit the temples of the sages scattered throughout the lands of Fevrith, to unlock the true power of Elaine's ring for the final confrontation against Galerius.
Lady Scarlet, I've word you propose a pilgrimage to the 6 sanctuaries of Fevrith. The staff His Holiness bequeathed to you houses a power unseen in any other. Perhaps its latent faculties will enable you to restore the sanctuaries to their prior function.
This seems like a strong driving force for visiting each region and restoring peace to each kingdom. A pilgrimage to the temples with the added bonus of helping the people engage in active combat versus Galerius' interfering forces. However, at this point, we have most likely already visited every region in Fevrith and completed every main quest, simply by following the main path as outlined by the gameplay requirements and story prompts. Albion has the highest level enemy units, and it isn't feasible for most players to explore here out of the suggested order without extreme challenge. Despite being tasked with exploring Fevrith and seeking out these temples, I had already encountered all of these temples throughout exploration. You just can't interact with them until after Albion and completing over 90% of the main game. This is even more of a shame considering that each temple provides some much needed development for Galerius and Baltro, alongside some historical significance for each region.
Enraptured by its supreme brilliance, they began to experiment, using the citizens of Albion as their subjects. In time, those experiments birthed a new race entirely, the population you know as angels.
Instead,
They forged a powerful crystal capable of transforming their bodies into those of colossal beasts.
We learn of the way in which the temples fell and the motivation behind the invasion of Cornea. These temple visits could have acted like a much-needed reminder of the game's primary plotline scattered throughout our exploration of each region. I suspect that for most players following the main game path, these temple visits probably occur one after another in the final 2 or 3 hours of the game. I know that for my playthrough, I quick traveled on the map and visited each temple immediately. Back-to-back cutscenes for about 15 minutes, and then proceeded to the endgame. We finally learn about the primary antagonists of the game at the very last stretch. It just feels out of place, especially when these temples could have occurred more organically throughout the story if they had been accessible without needing to be unlocked in Albion first. To me, it seems like a case of discord between the game's narrative and the path dictated to the player by gameplay necessity. We, as players, are left with a sense of ludonarrative dissonance. Narratively, it feels like the events of Albion should have occurred much earlier in the story than what we end up getting. Early game Albion makes a lot more sense to me, and I think a strong argument could be made for this case. Firstly, considering Scarlet's story at the end of the Cornea arc, at the beginning of the game, it would feel like a natural continuation of the plotline from this point. Visiting the Sage's temples also provides a strong motivation for visiting each region, before choosing to vanquish Galerius. As it currently stands, Drakenhold and Bistorius have no immediate relevancy to the main plotline. Their individual storylines are quite good, but it remains unclear why Elaine and company aren't actively pushing to restore the ring to full power at the earliest point possible. In terms of class diversity, early game Albion would also introduce more angel characters to your roster earlier. Early game we get access to Oclise, and that's it, for about another 40 to 50 hours. The entire angel class type is relegated to the final moments of the game. A shame considering how unique some of these classes actually are. After giving it some thought, I feel as if switching the order of Drakenhold and Albion in the game's plot would make a lot of sense. Drakenhold's story works very well as a standalone plot and could probably fit in well at any point in the main story. Virginia's story is strong and compelling, as are many of the side quests encountered in the region, but narratively, these could realistically occur at any point in the main game. Unit-wise, in Drakenhold we also recruit some characters and classes which can already be encountered in Cornea, including sword fighters, a cleric, and a sellsword. Some of these unique character classes in Drakenhold also just feel more like endgame units given how striking they look and how strong they are gameplay-wise. Albion has angel classes which, as things currently stand, will be encountered at the very end of the main campaign, not leaving very much time for the player to explore their unique playstyles. Narratively, Albion seems to want to occur earlier, but ends up stuck at the end of the story, leaving the game's original plotline to come across as an afterthought and massive exposition dump right before the final boss. I think switching the order of these two nations would fix some of these issues, and allow the story to unfold more organically as the player progresses through the game. So that's my pitch on why Unicorn Overlord's story feels just ever so slightly out of place. I think the storylines encountered over the course of the game are strong individually, yet it could benefit from a reordering of the sequence of events that most players end up experiencing. So what do you think of Unicorn Overlord's story? Does it feel like a disjointed story to you, or is it something else that bothers you? Sound off in the comments below and let me know what you think. Thanks for watching!